I was rummaging around in my kitchen and I discovered some buckwheat, roasted whole buckwheat, sitting on my pantry shelf, and I decided let's make some beef barley soup, but instead of beef barley, let's make it out of roasted buckwheat. I just wanted to give it a really nice quick rinse. I'm sure that this step isn't really needed for roasted buckwheat, but I wanted to liven it up because it had been sitting there for quite some time. I just gave it a rinse and then I tossed it into a pan and I put the pan on heat and let it start to heat up and dry out. Next, I found some beef bone broth that I had made up a few months ago. I found some canned tomatoes that I grew this last season, and I found some veggie broth that I had also canned up this last season when I was processing my vegetables from my garden. Next, I grabbed an onion and some garlic, and I went and rummaged around in the fridge for fresh ingredients. I found some leftover steak in the fridge. I had deboned some T-bone steaks and kept the bones for bone broth, fried up the steaks, and then this was the trim that I kept from those steaks. So I'm going to use that today for the soup. I found some garlic to use up, some celery, and some garden carrots that I actually found in the very, very, very back. I thought I was all gone. They were all gone, but I did manage to find some from the garden still that looked really good. So I just got some oil heating up in a pot on the stove and threw in the beef, the raw beef trim from the steaks that I kept from yesterday, chopped up an onion, and I just wanted to kind of make the pieces not too small, just chunks. Checked on the beef, gave it a stir. It was looking great. Moving on to chopping the celery. Next, I chopped up some celery, and I only actually used 1.5 carrots because they were really big once I got it chopped up. I thought it'd be too much to add all 3 carrots, so I kept them for making carrot sticks for lunches for tomorrow. So I just added the veggies into the cooked beef or the browned beef, and I decided to add some more beef and chopped up those leftover steaks. It was a really nice addition. The steaks were already seasoned and such. And then I chopped up some garlic and put the garlic in after I added the beef, just to kind of make sure it didn't burn or anything like that. Next, I added the beef broth and I tried to hold the fat out. I added a pint of tomatoes and then the vegetable broth. And I just turned the heat down, or turned the heat up, sorry. And then I added the buckwheat into the soup and just gave it a good stir. Next, I added some Worcestershire sauce, I would say about a tablespoon. Then I added some parsley. I think I added probably about a tablespoon to 1.5 tablespoons and gave it a good crush up. I added some more after too. This was thyme. I added about 1.5 teaspoons of thyme. And then I added some salt and pepper and just kind of gave it a good stir. Then I added some bay leaves, covered it up, and let it simmer. Next, I wanted to use up some gluten-free flour that I'd found in the cupboard. I found this shortening that needed to be used up. It was getting close to expiring. And just some random things. There's a little bit of cashew milk to use up. So I added 2 cups of Cloud9 gluten-free flour. Now, this stuff gets dark because it's made out of buckwheat. Next, I added 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And I also added probably about, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I grabbed the parsley and I added about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of parsley, and I added about 1/2 teaspoon of granulated garlic. I wanted to add more parsley to it again. I don't know, I'm just on a parsley kick today. Next, I added 1/2 cup of shortening, and instead of chopping it, I like to shave it with the pastry blender and just kind of shaved it into little little shavings, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And I just kind of wanted to make sure it was broken up into little bits. Next, I found a slice of cheese that was in the back of the fridge, and I wanted to get that all used up, so I just grated that in. It was just it was just kind of something to liven up the flour and give it a little bit of color and interest. This is totally optional. You could leave this out if you're trying to make biscuits like I am attempting to here. And I just added, I don't know how much milk I added. I would say probably 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup in total, because I kept adding it a little bit at a time, so I didn't overhydrate it. And I just wanted it to be like hydrated enough that it would stick together, but not like a sopping, like gross, messy dough. I wanted it to be quite shaggy of a dough. And I just turned it over into a cast iron pan. This one had been oiled previously, and so I just shaped it. One thing about this dough and this flour, it is really hard to roll out, so it's best to kind of just shape it in place, and that's what I was doing here. And I just cut it into quarters, and I could have cut them much smaller and such, but it was fine. I had to. It was gonna bake for 25 minutes anyway, so I just let it bake. So it was going to match around the time that it would take for the soup to be ready. So I left them a little bit larger, and then that way the bottom crisped up a little bit more. I also added some shortening into the pan. The soup smelled so good. I wish there was smell-o-vision. I tell you, homemade ingredients are just wonderful when you have grown the vegetables and you've preserved the vegetables, even the beef. The beef is homegrown. I really do love using buckwheat in place of barley, and I have done this for years, and it is just a great alternative. The biscuits crisped up really nicely on the bottom. They baked through. I didn't mind them, but the texture was weird compared to what regular biscuits are. But if you are a gluten-free person and you haven't had flour in a long time, these would be delicious. I know that because I used to be gluten-free, and I used to make these a lot more than I do now. But the texture was weird, and it is dark because of the buckwheat. But the soup, it was really good. I was craving buckwheat because buckwheat is high in L-lysine, and L-lysine helps with cold sores, which I have one right now.
Good? It does, yeah.
Blue one, it's gonna be hot.
Good.
You like it?
Mm-hmm.
What about the biscuit? See what it looks like on the inside. Cheesy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Does it taste good?
Mm-hmm.
For gluten-free? It's a weird texture, but it tastes good. Here's a close-up of the biscuit, but let's backtrack to yesterday. I got all the wonderful jars of things that we got out of freeze drying that clutter from the freezer the other day. So we have some cauliflower. This will become a powder, and I'm going to attempt in making a cauliflower crust pizza. I'm really excited for that. I've done it once before using cauliflower flour that I had freeze dried. It was delicious. These are really good. Peas and the mixed fruit. The corn is really it's really sweet. So yeah, look at that. Now I can use them more conveniently in different ways, and I have room in my freezer, and if I don't use these up, it doesn't really matter. I can use them as snacks, I can use them in cooking. It's made room in my freezer, And I can put them on my pantry shelf where I can see them and notice them, and they'll get used up much more efficiently.